Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into American political origins and evolving institutions. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill O'Brien. He's also your host for this continuing conversation. Here he is now, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Thank you, Bob Kincaid. Welcome to a Tuesday edition of the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Today is the second day of February in the year 2016. It is a Tuesday, and welcome to the program. This is the day after the Iowa caucuses. As I think everybody knows, the coverage is absolutely incredible. This is a media event, if there ever was one. They're all located there. They brought Tom Brokaw and Bob Schieffer out of retirement. I mean, this is big stuff. And I've got to admit, I sat there and I watched the results most of the evening last night. Obviously, I felt pretty good about the results, but I was taken with some of the media analysis of the results and the vote and how the vote was going and various other things. I was especially taken by Marco Rubio's victory speech for finishing third. I thought that was quite unique. And then I thought it was also sends a telling message when a candidate that theoretically everybody hates, according to Donald Trump, is able to win the primary. I thought that was quite interesting as well. I was also taken with the conclusion amongst many of the pundits that Senator Cruz's victory was, to a large degree, attributable to what they called evangelicals, especially since in the race you had Ben Carson, you had until after the evening was over, you had Mike Huckabee, and it would seem to me that, and I had no realized, because I would have offered all sorts of psychological support if I had known that the evangelicals were that torn in terms of where to put their support. But apparently, they decided to support Ted Cruz. And other pundits made the point that Senator Cruz had a ground game in Iowa that was second to none. And I thought, well, if the vote is attributable to evangelicals, then that doesn't seem to call for a ground game, unless the ground game focuses on the churches within the region. Whatever. And then, of course, and I found this particularly telling in Iowa. Maybe I'm revealing a little bit of urban bias here, but one of the analysts was pointing out that Rubio had focused his campaign on the urban areas, the more urban areas of Iowa. And I really, to be honest with you, wasn't aware that there were that many, but they did mention Dubuque and they did mention Davenport. And of course, there is Des Moines. And that Rubio was appealing especially to Roman Catholics in the area. So whatever. The point was, it was an interesting evening, and of course, that's just the Republican side. The Democratic side was for me a particularly interesting one. I still believe that the Clinton campaign made a mistake claiming victory before the victory was indeed an established fact. But be that as it may, I really believe that Senator Sanders was the big winner in the evening, because at least in Iowa he wasn't given much of a chance until toward the very end, and even then the Hillary Clinton campaign was claiming that they would win by more than a few percentage points, and they did not. So, in a sense, I feel very encouraged. I'm sure that Senator Sanders is very encouraged as well. very honestly, he was about as giddy as I seen him in the post-election results and comments that he made as he was leaving Iowa. I'd like to welcome you to today's edition of the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. I want especially to invite those of you who have comments and suggestions and ideas that you might like to share on the program that we began yesterday. We will complete it today, I trust. And I really do want to solicit and invite your comments and your suggestions and your ideas. This is a project, literally, that is in progress. So the famous work in progress. This is indeed one. In fact, I will acknowledge that prior to today's program, for a couple of hours before we went on the air today, I was indeed making some revisions in the text of this proposal. So I'm fairly confident, I'm fairly comfortable right now that this is about as good as I can make it, but obviously what I think about it really is not going to have nearly the impact that what you think about it might have. So I really do solicit your comments and your input, your suggestion, your ideas. Our phone number is area code 304-663-4676. 304-663-4676. If you'd like to communicate your thoughts and ideas to me directly via email, I would sure appreciate hearing from you. My email address is waobrien906@gmail.com. That's waobrien, OBRIEN, 906@gmail.com. And again, I do invite you to share with us your thoughts by going to our Facebook page. If you are a user of Facebook and you regularly look at Facebook or go through it and look at the messages there and the postings, I invite you to type in the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution, and you will be on the Virtual Center Facebook page. And there are a number of postings on that page that I believe might elicit some comments, some thought, some suggestions, some questions or whatever from you. And if you do indeed find yourself moved to make some comment on what's on the Facebook page, I do invite you to do it, either on the page itself or by sending me an email, or perhaps by giving us a call on a future program. Again, the phone number, area code 304-663-4676. Before we really get into our program today, this is just a very personal thing, but I had one of those delightful life experiences this morning, in that I was in the dentist's office bright and early this morning for a filling, and the proverbial needle and Novocaine and all the rest of it. So for the bulk of the morning, the whole left side of my jaw was pretty much frozen in space. And that didn't present too much a problem for me, except that I'm a coffee drinker, an avid coffee drinker. And I went for 2 or 3 hours after I left the dentist's office this morning, unable to drink coffee. I tried, but because of the numbness in my mouth, it kind of rolled out the side of my mouth, and I thought, no, I can't do this. This is too risky. I'll just wait it out. So I did wait it out, and especially I was hoping that the numbness would go before we went on the air for today's program, and indeed it's pretty much gone by now. And I'm standing here with talking to you right now with my first cup of coffee of the day in my hand. And I got to tell you, is it wonderful? So anyway, it is a pleasure to be with you. I mean that sincerely. I just kind of was thinking a little bit back on what I had just said about the numbness leaving, and I thought to myself, some people are out there maybe thinking to themselves, there's quite a bit of numbness on that program. I'm sure all of it hasn't left. But anyway, welcome to the program, and again, please feel free to share your thoughts and your ideas with us. Yesterday, for those of you who were with us yesterday, and I'd like to review a little bit of what we were talking about yesterday for those who were not. We were talking about education, more specifically higher education. And even more specifically than that, a proposal that myself and a small group of close friends have put together through as a result of a series of meetings we've had over the last several weeks, I would say several months actually. This particular project came into being, if you will, probably 3 or 4 years ago in conversations amongst the three of us. We worked together up until 3 years ago when I retired. And then last year, a second member of the group retired. And so there's only one of us out there left that's still slugging it out in the workplace, so to speak. But this project really emerged as a result of conversations we've had over the last few years about concerns we had about higher education. More specifically, about higher education's, at first we called it unwillingness, but it's really not unwillingness, it's inability to serve the real needs of the particular region we live in, which is southern West Virginia in Appalachia. But more specifically, these needs exist throughout the nation. Maybe not in such a large concentrated degree as they exist here in Appalachia, but they do exist. And what we're talking about are the number of uneducated and undereducated adults who, for a number of reasons, are unable, or I was going to say unwilling, but the fact of the matter is most of them never even dreamed of the possibility of going to college. These are the unserved. These are those that do not meet current admission requirements for most colleges and universities in the country. Many of them are not proficient readers. Many of them, as they went through high school, did not take the appropriate core courses necessary to be admitted into a reputable, accredited college. Many of them quit school without receiving their high school diploma. Many of them probably are currently involved in pursuing so-called GED degrees. Many of them, how many is hard to pin down, but at least some of them maybe began college and then for a number of reasons left college, dropped out. We call them in the higher education field, these folks are known as called stopouts. And what that means is they're people who began college, perhaps with a full intention to finish college, but for any number of reasons didn't do that. Maybe they got married and started to raise a family and suddenly realized that the pressures of generating an income seemed to be the priority at the time, and so they dropped out of college with the idea that they at some point in time would go back. But to be honest with you, many of them never did. Others were not qualified to go to college, could not meet the admission standards, really wouldn't have much of a chance successfully navigating the College Board exams or the ACT exams or other admission requirements demanded by most higher education institutions. Many of the adults we're talking about are financially challenged. They come from a background where the money and the resources necessary to go to college don't exist and never did exist. chances are that these people probably never even allowed the thought of going to college to even enter their mind, if they indeed ever thought of such a thing in the first place. The fact of the matter is, there is a substantial population of uneducated, undereducated adults out there that higher education institutions, colleges and universities, and indeed even community colleges, find it difficult, if not impossible, to serve. The community colleges, I think, are particularly an issue that I think is worthy of separate comment. Most people believed, as do I, or as did I, that community colleges would probably fulfill the need of beginning to serve these people. But for a number of reasons, that hasn't materialized, at least not to the degree that it should. I've spent a lot of time thinking about, reflecting upon the reasons for that. And one of the things I've noticed is a lot of the appeal of community colleges has been an appeal to those students who, for a number of reasons, were not academically qualified for direct admission into four-year colleges and universities. And so many of them went to community college with the idea that they would make up academic deficiencies, and then they would become eligible for admission into four-year colleges. So the fact of the matter is, some of our community college enrollment are people that are only there temporarily because they fully intend to transfer to a four-year institution. Others who are not really thinking about full-time college study at the four-year level are in degree and certificate diploma programs that are more job-focused. These are programs that lead directly to a job. And many adults, and indeed not adults, traditional age students, went into these programs, and things like electricity and plumbing and air conditioning and a number of other things. These are career-focused programs. They are not your traditional transfer programs where students in them would transfer to four-year institutions. The fact of the matter is, community colleges have tended to put their enrollment efforts principally into advertising their programs more than educating students. If I were to draw a conclusion, I would say that a major failing of our community colleges, and again, I know that our community colleges enroll thousands of young people around the country. President Obama is especially encouraged by the efforts of our community college because they are what we call open enrollment. In other words, community colleges tend not to consider the deficiencies that oftentimes keep students out, potential students, out of four-year institutions. Because community college advertises itself as a place to make up deficiencies and qualify for transfer into a university or into a college. The only problem with that is, and it's not necessarily a problem except for some students, even though the community colleges are open admission, in other words, if you went to high school and graduated from high school, you're eligible for admission to most community college programs. The fact of the matter is, these programs appeal to people for whom higher education beyond high school, is a reality, is an expectation. What we particularly have been addressing in our program yesterday are those for whom those expectations are not there. These are people who have believed, if they even ever thought of it, that college is not for them, it was not intended for them, they don't have the resources, they don't have the support system at home, they don't have the kind of social family support that would be necessary. So consequently, college has never really become part of their life plan, if indeed there is any such thing as a life plan. So what I'm talking about and what the proposal that we're talking about focuses on is adults who, for one reason or another, are being bypassed by our current higher education structure. They don't qualify for it. They don't necessarily want to qualify for it. They don't feel that they belong there. They wouldn't know how to go about entering college. They wouldn't know how to go about preparing for college board exams. In other words, college is so far beyond their spectrum, their thought process, their world, if you will, that it's not even a factor. The fact of the matter is, we know by looking at our economy, especially looking at the difficulty that many of our state budgets are in right now, we know that our economy, our society needs these people. And the reason I say that is because the reality is that many of these adults become significant users of the system. They become dependent upon the system, dependent upon the services that the system provides. These are the people that need tax breaks. These are the people that need rent subsidies. These are the people that need access to food shelters. These are the people that don't have health insurance or didn't until Obamacare have health insurance. These are the people that are moving into expanded Medicaid programs, at least in those states which were willing to expand their Medicaid programs, and are finally gaining access for the first time to health care. But the fact of the matter is, it's subsidized health care. It remains subsidized health care. In other words, if you look at the system from the broadest perspective, the people we're talking about are the people who are the principal users of the services provided in our society by our states and communities. And the fact of the matter is, they are becoming, as our economy becomes increasingly global, increasingly competitive, and increasingly skill-driven, as our economy becomes increasingly technological, more and more of these adults are being rendered unemployable. They are being displaced. They are being discarded. These are the people that in our programs of several months ago we referred to as useless in the modern system of so-called new capitalism that we talked about. People that are capable of mastering the highly technical skills necessary to make it competitively in our modern economic world. Fewer and fewer of those people are available. More and more of our adult population is falling by the wayside. They don't have the skills, they don't have the ability, they don't have the training necessary to keep up in our economy. Consequently, they become users. If they are not users now, they are likely to be users before too long. These are people that don't have adequate retirement planning. They are people that will, at some point in time, require some sort of public assistance. If not during their working years, clearly during their retirement years, their older years. Consequently, as our economies are suffering, one major reason they're suffering is because of the demands of this particular population for services. And as the political debate heats up amongst liberals and conservatives as to how to best deal with this population, conservatives obviously push hard for not increasing taxes, for reducing services, finding ways to require these people to become more self-sufficient, go back to work, in other words. The fact of the matter is, in today's highly technological, competitive world, there isn't all that much work out there. And so the fact of the matter is we seem to be running against, or coming up against, a brick wall. Maybe not the high, long, miles long wall that Donald Trump has been talking about, that's going to keep out illegal aliens, illegal immigrants, but a wall nonetheless. These are the people that we are talking about addressing. Those that for one reason or another, nobody can address. And as we pointed out yesterday, we have come up with a name. We call it University College, LLC, a limited liability corporation. And of course, what limited liability means, for those who may not know, is that you don't risk your home and your savings and your retirement money and everything else if the enterprise doesn't make it. In other words, your liability is limited. Limited liability legislation is one of the perks that encourages people to form businesses, encourages entrepreneurs to be willing to give it a try, and to give it a second try if they don't make it the first time. Yesterday, we began to look from a conceptual point of view. We began to look at this organization. Talked a little bit about ourselves, the participants in this particular enterprise, myself and the two colleagues that are in it with me. We obviously emphasized our years in higher education. One of our one member of our group spent 30 years in human resource management with Westinghouse Corporation. The other two, myself and one other person, have spent our careers in higher education. Much of it in the classroom. Both of us have taught continually throughout our years in higher education, but also in administration. One of the participants spent 30 years working for the Higher Learning Commission based in Chicago, and was sent around the country to accredit on accreditation visits to colleges and universities, has been doing that for 30 years. So in other words, we know what the demands and the requirements and the standards of the Higher Learning Commission are. We know what it takes for higher education to be accredited. And of course, the idea of getting it accredited is that when it becomes accredited, it's transferable. In other words, you move your academic credits, the courses you've completed successfully, from one institution to the other. But by definition, an accredited institution cannot accept transfer credits from a non-accredited institution. That, as some of you may be aware, has been one of the major problems in our higher education world. Because of the opportunities and the demands being placed on the need for improved education and skills, too many fly-by-night operations, I don't know how else to say this, have surfaced. Most of them are not accredited. Most of them charge absolutely outrageous, obscene amounts of tuition. They promise the world, but they deliver very little. A lot of our most gullible people have fallen for the sales pitch of some of these highly sophisticated for-profit institutions and enterprises. And what they find is that if after spending all of this money and going into deep debt in terms of tuition, many of these people end up with credits that they can't transfer anywhere because they're not accredited. Their degree is worthless. And they are in debt to the point that many of them could indeed own a house with what they owe. $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 worth of student loans that they are required to pay back. And of course, we live in a capitalist society that operates on the assumption that the buyer must beware. So as much concern as there is for many of these people, the fact of the matter is there's been little done to really move in and regulate these people. Part of it is because of the idea of freedom and support for business enterprise and lack of government regulation that's so prominent in our society. Many people demand that we begin to regulate many of these efforts, many of these institutions and enterprises, but there's a lot of opposition to that. And of course, these institutions spend a lot of money lobbying in Washington and in state capitals against efforts to regulate them. And so the fact of the matter is, many of them have taken advantage of a lot of our people. And if these folks were anti-higher education before, if they were not higher education before, they sure are now. Many of them have a very, very bitter taste in their mouth, and they're not going to be easily persuaded to come back and give it another try. But the fact of the matter is, there are so many adults in our society that are not being served, that are not being rendered competitive in today's world, that our entire economic growth trajectory is being negatively impacted by them. These people are dead weight. They are anchors on economic growth. They inhibit our flexibility. They inhibit our development because they put a tremendous burden on our taxpayers because they require so many services. So it stands to reason that if we can begin to deliver services to these folks and we can render them independent and self-sufficient, then by definition, they cease to be public service users and they're likely to become public service contributors and taxpayers. Rather than using the services, they are contributing to the support of those services. The result is that these advances, these positive gains in our economic numbers are going to be readily visible. At least that's what we expect. If you removed from the equation the biggest users of public services and you turn them into producers of public services, obviously not all 100%, nobody expects that. But if you begin to make serious inroads into the demands for services and begin to turn many of the current users of these services around and make them contributors, tax-paying producers, rather than service users, it seems to me that the impact of that on the economy and on the numbers which measure the economy will be quite visible and quite significant. I think that's an important feature of this particular program. Not only are we in the business of potentially offering services, delivering services to people that didn't have them before, but we're delivering the kinds of services that promise to have the biggest impact on our overall economic growth. I think that is extremely important and significant as well. I mentioned that just this morning I was involved in making additional corrections and additions to this particular program. And I'd like to share some of those thoughts and some of those ideas with you. Yesterday, we were talking about the fact that what we're proposing here is not any magic formula. We have no magic bullet, if you will, to solve what seems to be an irresolvable problem. And I'm going to focus on the text here, and then we can elaborate on it afterwards. What University College offers is vision, programmatic flexibility, and dedication to profession, region, and most importantly to students. All these, and plus well over a century of combined higher education and private sector experience. So that's kind of an introductory sentence. I think this is extremely substantive. We know higher education, its promise and its limitations. We know, too, the skill demands of prospective employers. We know what today's job market requires in terms of skills. Here's the key. Not specific job-related skills, of course. Those come with the job. In other words, you can't know the specific requirements of a particular job until you're hired. What we're talking about is what are the skills that prospective employers look for before they make the decision to hire you? What is it they are looking for in you that makes them willing to give you a chance? They'll teach you the details. They'll teach you the specific job-related skills. That's not what we're talking about. Think about that for a moment. We've been running a rat race in higher education for, it seems, forever. We advertise programs, and here I'm thinking specifically of community colleges, because they're the ones that fall victim to this more than anybody else. We market particular programs, and we advertise the idea that there are jobs. There are projected to be more jobs in this area. And so what we do is recruit. We attract significant numbers of unemployed or underemployed adults looking for economic opportunities, a new chance, a new career. And they leave whatever job they're in, or they take on study part-time, and they pursue the classes they need in order to get the certificate or the particular diploma in the field that they're after. But the reality is, by the time many of these people are ready to go to work, the jobs are gone. Because in the technological age we live in, change is happening faster than we can keep up with it. We find ourselves in higher education, we find ourselves preparing students for careers that don't exist by the time they're ready to seek entry into them. We're chasing the train down the tracks. We're running as fast as we can. But too often, we can't catch it. And the reason for that is that we've been concentrating on trying to teach the skills that jobs require. In our community college, we even hire the professionals in the particular fields. We hire electricians to teach electricity. We hire plumbers to teach plumbing. We hire contractors to teach this, that, and the other thing. The idea is the people who do the job are the only ones who can teach it because they know the specific skills required. So our colleges and universities, but to a greater extent, our community colleges, have tried to offer as many of these programs and hire as many of these people as possible in order to generate students, enrollment, and at the same time meet the employment needs of the communities in which they exist. But too often, that effort does not fully succeed. It succeeds to a degree. I'm not suggesting that it's a total failure. It's not. But the fact of the matter is, it's more job specific. It's more program specific than our colleges and universities and educational institutions have any business dabbling in. In fact, from my experience working with employers, visiting employers, and I was involved for years in part of my years in higher education, I was involved in off-campus education. I used to market programs, college and university programs, to employers. So I've spent a lot of time off campus visiting with employers or prospective employers about particular programs or particular certificate degrees or whatever that we might be able to develop that would prepare graduates for entry into their businesses. And one of the things I found in the private sector was hostility. Because many employers would make the argument, we're not looking for you to train people to do our jobs. We'll train the people. We know the job. We know what we want them to do. And we know how to train them to do it well. You don't need to be in that business. What we want from you, colleges and universities and community colleges, we want students, graduates, who we can train. We want you to send us students who have the skills and the attitudes, the motivation, people who want to work, know how to work, will be responsible employees, will be willing to put in a good day's work for a good day's pay. You send us those people, we'll train them. So in a sense, what became very clear to me over the years was that higher education is throwing good dollars down the proverbial poop chute by trying to compete with employers and prepare students to fill these jobs. The fact of the matter is, with technology changing as quickly as it is, many of these jobs are gone by the time we're ready to graduate students to fill them. What that means is we end up with a lot of extremely angry, frustrated, disappointed students who spent a lot of money, invested a lot of time, maybe gone into debt for a lot of money to get a certificate or a degree for a job that doesn't even exist anymore. So the question is, how do we resolve that? What we're proposing here is a program that's focused on developing the skills that employers look for in prospective employees before they take on the job of training them. We're looking to provide the employees that employers are looking for. In today's challenging, competitive, technological world, we're talking about employees with significant cognitive skills, the ability to solve problems, the ability to do research, the ability to work well with others, the ability to participate in team efforts, the ability to work closely with others in solving problems, realizing that we live in a world where individual people don't solve anything by themselves. We're looking for people that are self-learners. We're looking for people that will be the most attractive in today's world of new capitalism. What does that mean? We're looking for employees who don't have what they think is a fixed set of skills that's going to keep them working for the rest of their working lives. We know that we live in a world where employees are going to have to change jobs, if not careers, 3, 4, 5 times in their working lives. We know that our new employers, if you will, the new capitalism, is looking for employers who are flexible, who are mobile, who are willing to go back to the drawing board and learn a whole new set of skills. And the way to do that is to prepare our students, not by giving them the specifics of what they know to do a particular job, but giving them the kind of background, the kind of education, and yes, training that they need to educate themselves, to teach themselves, to learn what they need to know in a new situation by themselves, without necessarily quitting the job and going back to school for another year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be. We're talking about turning out what higher education people for a number of years have been calling lifelong learners. Every one of us has heard this idea of lifelong learning. What does it mean? It means that people need to know how to learn. What we do in our higher education institutions is not teach people what they'll need to know, because we can't predict that. What we can do is prepare them to deal with it, to address it. We need to be concentrating principally on preparing people to handle and manage change. Not to hide from it, not to run from it, but to embrace it and to master it. This is the ticket. This is the future. And if we can find a way to encourage the adults who are out there and seem to have no place to go, to give us a chance, we believe that we can turn a bad situation around. And that's what we're proposing to do. As we've mentioned in this proposal, we know higher education. We also know the skill needs of prospective employers. Not job-related skill needs, of course. Those come with the job. The skills that we're talking about nurture cognitive and attitudinal skills. Skills that help build a problem-solving, proactive attitude. And with it, the kind of self-confidence, sense of responsibility, and strength of character needed to function as a lifelong learner, an employee who's challenged by change, not disarmed by it. That's what we're about. That, we believe, is unique. That, we believe, few institutions can do. In fact, we're convinced, because most of us, all of those involved in this, the three of us, have been at enough institutions over the years to know that most institutions don't really know how to do this. They claim that they offer a quality education which prepares students to be able to do these things, but they really don't know how to do it. They assume that if students go through the process and graduate, somehow, by magic, they'll be able to perform. But the fact of the matter is, we know that we're hearing from employers all the time who are saying, we're hiring graduates who can't write. We're hiring graduates that don't know how to read well enough. We're hiring people that don't know how to do anything. We're hiring people that don't want to do anything. They're looking for the easy way. They're not looking for challenges. They're working hard to dodge them. In fact, what they're telling us is that in many cases, we're turning out students that employers don't want at all. Consequently, they're going overseas to find what they need, what they want. They're looking for specific high-tech skills, and they're getting them. But the fact of the matter is, they're not getting the full, well-rounded employees that they want that will contribute to the company. They're getting people that can do specific things when it comes to high tech. But for anything else, they're going to have to look elsewhere. And the fact of the matter is, our economy, our society, is filled with all of these people who are increasingly becoming non-productive, that nobody wants, that nobody knows how to use. They need skills, but they don't know what they are. Yesterday, I posted a piece on Facebook about this, and I mentioned a little bit of history. And I didn't mention this on the program yesterday, but I think right now maybe it would be a good time to mention this, because I think it's quite significant. In recent years, most people out there in the world of work, most employers, most human resource people, most HR people that did the hiring for corporations and such, would make a distinction between education and training. For a long time, there was kind of a rivalry, a hostility, a bitterness, if you will, between those who trained and those who educated. Professors on college campuses and university campuses looked down on employee trainers, looked down on corporate trainers who prepared employees to be able to do a particular job. And the argument that educators used was, there's a difference between education and training. Trainers teach people to be able to do one thing well. We educate people to do everything well. The fact of the matter is, of course, they're not able to do that. Trainers, on the other hand, and I've known many of them over the years, trainers, on the other hand, tend to look negatively at educators. and make comments all the time about professors on college campuses by saying, oh, they know everything there is to know about what's in a textbook. When it comes to down-to-earth, common sense ability to manipulate or maneuver through the world, they don't know anything. They don't know how to do anything. All they know how to do is think and discuss and debate. But they never reach a decision. They never get to the point where they ever do anything because they can't do anything. And so what we've had for the last several decades, not just last few years, this has gone on, I've been involved in it since the 70s. The 70s, 80s, 90s, early 21st century. This bitterness, this distrust, if you will, between the world of higher education and the world of corporate training has been systemic. Employers have been complaining because our colleges and universities aren't giving them the talent that they feel they need and have a right to. Educators, on the other hand, are unwilling to allow employers to get too close. They want to keep business at a distance because they know historically that through much of the nation's history, business has tried to take over control of what colleges teach, of curriculum. And it's still going on. Let me give you one example that I know about. The Koch brothers, Koch Industries. They are funding entire programs, degree programs, at colleges and universities in Kansas and around the country. They are pumping big dollars into higher education campuses in exchange for programs that they control. They want to teach free enterprise. They want to teach small government. They want to teach capitalism. They want to teach freedom. They want to teach opportunity. They want to teach limited government. They want to get government out of people's lives. They want to eliminate red tape that's associated with government regulation. In other words, they have an agenda, and they're willing to pay for that agenda. And unfortunately, too many higher education institutions are willing to sign into that deal. They are making Faustian agreements. They are making agreements with the devil. Because in the process of getting short-term infusions of money, they are selling out their academic and intellectual souls. Because they are turning out students whose worldview and perspective and knowledge is being dictated by entrepreneurial, profit-motivated interests rather than academic, cognitive, intellectual development that classic education is all about and advocates. What we've got going on here is huge. And it's been a division. It's been a discord. It's been a lack of communication. For years, colleges and employers couldn't talk. The world of business and the world of the campus couldn't communicate. They were talking different languages. They were talking by each other. Colleges believed, appropriately, that businesses wanted to take over what they did. Businesses, on the other hand, were pushed into trying to get more and more control over what colleges and universities did because the caliber of students they were getting was not up to what they needed or wanted. The fact of the matter is, it seems that all of this is changing. The world of new capitalism, so-called, The high-tech world of the early 20th century is changing the equation, because what it's doing is creating technological demands for skills that only well-educated people can meet. In other words, the kinds of high-tech skills that the corporate world is currently demanding are skills that trainers can't meet, because trainers themselves don't have the skills in demand. What they need are highly sophisticated, highly educated people. But the fact of the matter is, the highly educated people that they need are becoming fewer and fewer and fewer, because we depend on the fact that enough of them are being born, but we don't know how to train them. We don't know how to educate them. We don't know how to create them. In other words, the technological demands of the modern work world are changing faster and moving faster than our education world can keep up with it. And we're losing people along the way, more of them and more of them and more of them. Many of the people that are losing their jobs will never get them back. They've got to change careers. But the kinds of careers that are out there and have opportunities require skills and education levels that these people can't meet. The situation calls for, it seems to me, exactly what we're pinpointing in this proposal. The difficult part is going to be that many of those who would fund a proposal like this don't believe it's possible. But the fact of the matter is, it is, and we know it. We know how to do it. In fact, to be honest with you, much of what we're proposing is day-to-day behavior here at the Virtual Center. We're using primary sources. We're going between the lines. We're going behind the scenes. We're getting into the heads of authors. We're speculating and trying to imagine what the author had in mind when he or she wrote this, that, or the other thing. We're looking at long-term implications. We're looking at who wins and who loses. We're looking at the overall potential costs of a particular change. We're looking at all the kinds of things that are necessary in a world where only the few born into this kind of world can navigate it. That's the 1/10 of 1% that Bernie Sanders is talking about, that are making obscene amounts of money and salaries because their skills are so sophisticated and so in demand, and there are so few who can meet those demands. We have got to find ways to generate more people who can meet those demands, and we know how to do it. And I think that's what we're on to here. So I'm excited about it. I wish I had come up with something like this 30 years ago. But the fact of the matter is, better late than never. What I'm proposing, what we are proposing, I see I because I wrote this, but I think all three of us own it. University colleges' legal status as an independent provider gives it the operational flexibility necessary to perform and deliver on a mission that we see as quite unique. Basically, what we're talking about then is offering our services on a contractual basis to institutions and organizations. The key is we've got to remain flexible. We've got to be free. We can't allow ourselves to be subject to bureaucratic rules and regulations of colleges or universities or state higher education systems or corporate boards or anything else. If we're going to be able to do what we want to do, we've got to be free to do it. What we're proposing is you give us the freedom and you give us access to very limited amounts of equipment and space that we'll need. And you stand back and you let us do our thing. And when we're done, you can give our graduates any kind of test you want and they will pass it. We will give you students who will be able to meet whatever admission requirements or expectations you want as an employer or you want as a college admissions department. All we ask from you is give us the flexibility and the opportunity to be able to do it. That's the proposal. Our goal, this gets into some of the specifics of how we propose to do this. I realize that there are risks here because we're giving away the formula to the chemical that's going to solve the disease, if you will. But the fact of the matter is, I think the upside of explaining this is that there aren't all that many people, unfortunately, at least not yet, who can do this. I think what we're proposing is a proposal that is something that'll change that equation. It's one thing to know what needs to be done. It's another thing to be able to do it. I don't think our colleges and universities, as they're currently structured, can do this. They have to be accountable. They have to meet standards. They have to raise money. They have graduates. They have alumni who have very important expectations. If they're going to contribute money, they want results. They want to see their results. And so there are so many restrictions and limitations on how colleges and universities operate that I don't think too many of them will be able to take anything like this on. I think not only do we have something that might work, I think we have the only way, or the only model where it can work. And here's what we're talking about. University colleges' initial on-site enrollment goal is 100 students a term. We'll enroll 100 students on-site, on campus, whatever it is. We're calling it a campus because if we contract with a college or a university, we're looking for some classroom space and access to some equipment. That's our core population, the 100 students. But that's not the program. What we will do is provide a level of educational rigor to these 100 students that we believe will exceed anything they're going to get elsewhere. And what we propose to do is use modern technology to capture it, all of it. We will capture the methodology. We will capture the specifics. We will capture the techniques. We'll capture the teaching strategies. We will capture all of it, and we will make what we capture available to people out there in the community at large without making them come to us. We will bring the instruction to them. We literally will use modern technology to put this curriculum on the kitchen table of everybody out there who might want it. We will form what most people refer to as cohorts. These cohorts will be springing up everywhere, and what the cohorts do will be directly based on what we do with the core population on campus. These regional study groups will be constantly forming, and they will be managed and served by us at the home base. This model, this is our effort to explain the model. This model captures the full potential of instructional technology without sacrificing the very real advantages of on-site interaction and group learning. We know that the best education happens not in isolation at your kitchen table, but in groups. So therefore, we will form the groups, and we will bring the specifics of the curriculum to the groups, and they will learn it together. And we'll manage it from the home base, as it were. Besides the instructional advantages, this model solves the serious quality and student retention issues associated with more traditional distance delivery systems. Homeschooling doesn't work. Well, let me change that. I'm not talking about homeschooling of one's own kids. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is study at home, getting a college degree at home by yourself on your own time doesn't work, because you can't learn what you need to know by yourself. That's why I'm constantly encouraging people to call, and let's try to get as much interaction here at the virtual center as possible. The more that happens, the more people learn, including me. So this model with these regional groups solves the problem, the quality problem, usually associated with distance learning. Students who register for programs that are offered totally online usually don't finish, usually don't complete. If they do, they end up with a piece of paper. They end up with a credential that doesn't signify a whole lot. What we're doing is capturing both the in-class experience and the technological delivery associated with it. At the same time, we're preserving the cost effectiveness of distance delivery. Classes offered over the internet are cheaper for colleges and universities to offer. If you're paying an instructor to teach a class of 15 students in a classroom, if you can televise or deliver that class to 1,500 students at the same time, it doesn't cost you that much more. It's cost effective. The problem is that academically it's a disaster. We believe that we've got the formula to turn what is currently a disaster into the model that will solve the nation's higher education and training skill development problems. We are proposing a 15-credit, 5-course program. When a student finishes these 5 classes, each of them will be credentialed by us as qualified for admission to any accredited university program in the country. Not only that, we will bear 100% of all the costs for administering the program, recruiting the students, and teaching the students. All the organizations or institutions have to do is give us the space, let us have access to some of the technological equipment to capture what goes on in that space, and we'll do the rest. From the broadest perspective, conceptually, that's what we're proposing. In the proposal, I have listed 10 specific ingredients of the program, 10 things that we will specifically do as part of this program. When I first thought about sharing this with you here at the Virtual Center, I was focusing principally on these 10 things rather than on the concept itself. But the interesting thing is, the more I found myself getting into the concept yesterday, but especially today, very honestly, I'm kind of into this. I really believe that the concept has more to offer than the details, than the specifics. But one of the things that we insist on, and this will be part of our contractual requirements, we will be in control. We will be in charge of our own enrollment. We will become the community's champion for a college or for higher education and training. We don't care whether a person who enrolls with us wants to go to college, wants to get a job. We're basically operating on the fact that the kind of skills needed to do either one in today's world are more challenging than they've ever been before. So our job is not only to provide it, our job is to sell it. Our job is to convince people that they can be successful if they give it this one last chance. I want to share with you one thing that I think is significant about this entire initiative. There's a sentence in here that says the following: unlike so many such programs, driven more by profit than results, this one begins and ends a public service. We are not in this to get rich. To be honest with you, we're not going to be around long enough to get rich. We're proposing that we can do this cheaper than any of our current colleges or universities can do it. Because we're not going to have the kind of administrative overhead that colleges and universities find themselves forced to have. What we propose to make as net profit, after all the expenses are paid, all the costs are figured in, then what we'll have left is profit, net profit. We believe, we intend to reinvest a significant amount of that profit into the enterprise. We're not looking to take money out of the project and stash it in the Cayman Islands or anywhere else. We're talking about reinvesting what we make in the enterprise in order to make it available to more people. This is indeed public service. Most of us have agreed, the three of us have agreed in our meetings, that this is what we've got, this is what we can do, this is what we offer. Let's be about doing it. And that's what this proposal is about. I can share with you some of the specific details of the items listed. One of them is this idea of becoming the champion for higher education and high-tech training in the community. We'll recruit our own students. As I mentioned, we're talking about a curriculum, a course, a program comprised of 5 classes. What we're initially thinking is charging $100 a class. That means for most students, unless a student is forced to repeat a particular class because the first time through it didn't work, we're proposing that students can go through this for $500. Obviously, we're anticipating that we'll have a lot of takers, because the fact of the matter is, if we don't have a lot of takers, it's not worth doing. The pricing and everything is conducive to a large enrollment. If lots of people don't take advantage of this, then it can't work. So we've got to price it in a way which makes it attractive. Governments are appropriating money, state governments, the federal government, are appropriating money by the tens of millions of dollars to do exactly what we're proposing to do for $500 a student. Hopefully, we'll be able to tap into some of that money. The more successful we are, the more likely it is that that more people will be willing to work with us. This is what is called a replicatable model. I mean, we can begin the model where we are, but we can move it to wherever. One of our regular listeners emailed me, actually Facebooked me, from California. I've seen this person's name on comments before on Facebook. I've seen the fact that this person is a regular supporter of the Head On Radio Network and was here long before I was. I had no idea until in the last 24 hours that this person was based in California. And from California, he regularly participates in this program. So we're not limited by geography. Technology gives us the opportunity to take this anywhere and everywhere. All we need is the willingness and the ability to go about it. And I'm very, very excited, because to be very honest with you, this concept, this proposal captures in sum total the higher education experience that I've had for half a century. I believe that most of the important things that I've learned and done throughout my entire career are represented and reflected in this proposal. And my colleagues feel likewise. As far as tests, we'll test the spiffy the word that a lot of these proposals use is assessments. We'll assess what we're doing. We'll assess how effective what we're doing is. If what we're doing isn't working, then our assessments will reflect that. And if it's not working, we'll do something else. This will constantly be a program, a work in progress, a program in transition. We hope, we trust that we can tap into a lot of people out there who have the talents and the skills to participate in this kind of a project with us once they get a chance to understand it and see it and experience it. There are a lot of retired people out there, retired professionals, college professors, attorneys, chemists, physicists, biologists, doctors, neurologists. There are a lot of people out there with a lot of skills and a lot of abilities who have retired because they've reached retirement age. But they are not dead. They remain alive. They remain productive. And if they're enjoying a well-planned retirement, they're probably eager for an opportunity to get involved in something like this. Nobody even thinks about them. But we're thinking about them a lot. In a nutshell, that's what this proposal is about. We have reached the point, we've got one more meeting scheduled later this week. And then I believe we reached the point, as they say, where we're ready to put this baby on the road. And we'll see what happens. I would say at this point, other than the three of us who were involved in its development, the only people that know about this or what's involved in it are in this audience at the virtual center right now. I hope that will change. But I go back to my opening comments. If ever I solicited input, reactions, ideas, suggestions, comments, criticisms on anything that I've ever done, this is the one that I most welcome and value that input. If there are things we're not considering or things we should consider, we'd like to know them before we take it out there and get embarrassed because we didn't consider it. So, again, we solicit your calls, your ideas, your contributions, your suggestions, your best wishes, if nothing else. We've reached the end of our program. It's 58 minutes after the hour. I need to announce that we will not be doing a live program tomorrow at the Virtual Center. I have a doctor's appointment which has been scheduled for a long time. It took me a long time to get this particular appointment, and I didn't want to not keep it. The only time that I could get it was right during our program tomorrow, and I took it because I didn't know what the alternatives were if I chose not to take it. So therefore, I've already communicated with Bob Kincaid and the folks at Head On that tomorrow's program would probably be something else, something pre-recorded, whether it's mine, whether it's Bob's, from one of his Head On programs, whatever. But our next time together will be next Monday here at the Virtual Center. For the Virtual Center and for the Head On Radio Network, Bob Kincaid and his folks, thank you so much for your kindness and your attention and your continued support. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. I hope you have a great weekend. Be kind to each other, and we'll see you next time here at the Virtual Center. Thank you.